part of the president's promised kept talking points that he'll be talking about tonight for sure include his work on veteran issues. Senator Jerry Moran serves on the Veterans Affairs Committee and has been involved in veterans issues for many years. Joining us from the great city of Manhattan, Kansas. Good to see you, sir.
Hey, good to be with you. Thank you. And thanks for highlighting veterans and the efforts to make things better in their lives and keeping our commitments to those who served our nation.
Yeah, they're important, as is your work on this. We'll get to that in a minute. First, though, I want to get your thoughts on North Korea. We know you were at this White House briefing where the president asked all U.S. senators to hop in a couple of buses from Capitol Hill, come over to the White House for this briefing. It seems as though after that, it can't be that this latest missile test was really that big of a surprise.
Well, I don't think a missile test involving North Korea is a surprise anymore. And I suppose the discouraging thing about this is that all the world's attention is focused on North Korea on this topic, and yet they continue at every opportunity to test more missiles and to demonstrate their capabilities. Fortunately, they've been unable to demonstrate those capabilities, but they continue, which suggests the necessity of working even harder to get a policy that constrains their behavior, but it demonstrates how difficult that's going to be. They're not easily persuaded.
Yeah, well, we did hear from Secretary of State Tillerson some other things that he wants done, tougher sanctions, perhaps going after financial institutions that deal with the North Korea regime. Bigger question, though, and that is oftentimes what doesn't happen is as important as what does. And I'm wondering if you got from the White House a sense of the red line, and if that is why we haven't seen another North Korean nuclear test.
Well, I think that the red line, although this hasn't been stated explicitly to me and wasn't stated certainly in that briefing, and again, it was a classified briefing, but I've also had, I serve on the Defense Appropriations Committee that funds the intelligence agencies. We've had additional classified briefings, so that conversation is a bit off the table, is clearly off the table, but I would tell you that the line here is to trying to do everything we can to make sure that North Korea doesn't have the capability of causing chaos and death in South Korea and Japan in the region, but importantly, trying to make certain that no missile can reach the shores of the United States and cause death and damage to American citizens and cities and our citizens.
You know, well, we've certainly heard some warning bells from the folks at the Pentagon when it comes to that. Moving on now to the issue near and dear to your heart of Veterans Affairs. We heard a lot of promises from President Trump during the campaign as it relates to veterans. We just saw these 2 executive orders signed this week. Is it enough, or do we still have a lot of work to do and we can look at this as maybe a down payment of sorts?
Oh, it's only a down payment. There is so much more to be done, and so much of it has to do with the people that are in charge at the Department of Veterans Affairs. I chair the Appropriations Committee that funds the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I've always indicated that if you can demonstrate to me the problem is lack of money, I'm going to be a supporter for providing the taxpayer dollars to support those who supported us, who served our nation. But the problems at the VA over a long period of time are really related to a culture, to leadership, to a lack of responsibility, to accountability. And we need significant change at the Department of Veterans Affairs on behalf of those who served our country. And It is pleasing to me to see the focus that the president is putting on what he said during the campaign. He's pursuing.
Real quickly, Senator, I want to button this up. Senator, I want to button this up, though. We only got about 45 seconds left. As you noted, there's sort of systemic issues at the VA, and the question is there been enough changes put in place at the top to change those? For so long, it's been so hard to fire people, to get rid of the dead weight, and for that matter, the people who caused these problems in the beginning. Has that been fixed, that now really the secretary there can clean house, or is his hands still tied no matter how good his intentions?
His hands are still tied, and there has not been enough done. That's an easy question to answer. We have a long way to go in that regard. The Senate is expected to approve further legislation that gives the Secretary a greater ability to discharge those who do harm to veterans, who don't do their jobs well. And mostly, in my view, we're talking about people at the upper echelon, the 400 senior executives need to create a different culture there so that firing an employee is not necessary. We also got to protect those employees who report bad behavior. We don't want them to be the scapegoat. Here in Kansas, we've been working hard to make certain that somebody who commits crimes, who would be charged with a felony against a veteran, doesn't receive his pension benefits. That's a VA issue that needs to be addressed. And we need to do a lot more to make certain that the VA changes. Part of that is getting veterans to access care across the country through the Choice Act, giving them other options. Part of it is a greater effort that allows a secretary to lead the department.
Well, as you point out, Senator, there is so much work on this to do. Appreciate your time. Look forward to having you back to chat about it sometime as this continues and the legislation comes down. Fox News, of course, is your